In October 1347, the loud, crowded, screaming engine of the medieval world suddenly stopped. A couple of months before, a ship docked in Sicily carrying a cargo that would kill nearly half of everyone you know. We usually tell this story as a horror movie, a tale of swollen glands, rotting flesh, and doctors in bird masks, but that is only half the story. If you look past the bodies, you find something else. You find the single most important economic and social event of the last 1,000 years. The Black Death wasn't just a tragedy. It was a hard reset for humanity. It broke the chains of feudalism, it made labor expensive, it sparked the printing press, and it pushed Europe onto the ocean to find the New World. The modern world didn't begin with a politician or a war, it began with a flea. This is how the Black Death built the world we live in today. The Malthusian Trap. To understand the change, we have to understand the trap Europe was stuck in before the plague. In the early 1300s, Europe was actually a victim of its own success. It was crowded. The population had exploded, but agricultural technology hadn't kept up. Economists call this the Malthusian Trap. There were too many people and not enough land. This simple math defined your life. Because there were so many peasants, human life was cheap. If you were a landlord, you didn't have to pay your workers well or at all, because if one peasant died or left, there were 10 more begging to take his place. This created a rigid, locked society. The rich held all the cards. Rents were high, wages were low, and inequality was absolute. Innovation was stagnant because why build a machine to grind grain when you can just force 5 starving peasants to do it for free? Europe was gridlocked. It was a society seemingly destined to stay frozen in this feudal nightmare forever. Then, in roughly 4 years, the board was flipped. Between 1347 and 1351, depending on the region, 30 to 60% of the population evaporated. And when the survivors finally stepped out of their homes, they looked around and realized the unthinkable. The math had changed. The golden age of the peasant. For the first time in history, the supply of humans was low, but the demand for work was high. This is the moment the labor market was born. Imagine you are a peasant in England in 1350. Before the plague, you were tied to the land, essentially a slave. But now, the lord of the manor is desperate. His crops are rotting in the fields because half his workforce is dead. He approaches you. He doesn't order you. He asks you. If he doesn't pay you a good wage, you can just walk to the next village, where the neighboring lord will pay you double. The ruling class panicked. In England, the king passed the Statute of Laborers in 1351, a law that literally made it illegal to pay peasants more than they earned before the plague. They tried to freeze wages by royal decree. But you cannot legislate against the laws of supply and demand. The law failed. The feudal system, which relied on people being stuck on the land, collapsed. Historians refer to the post-plague era as the golden age of the laborer. Real wages, which means how much food and stuff you can actually buy with your money, doubled and then tripled. The diet changed. Before the plague, the poor ate grain and gruel. After the plague, with fewer mouths to feed, land that used to grow grain was turned into pasture for cows and sheep. The average person started eating meat, butter, and cheese. They drank beer. This created the first stirrings of a middle class. People had disposable income. They became consumers. And when you have consumers with money, you have an economy that starts to churn and grow in ways the feudal system never allowed. Necessity is the mother of invention. But the lack of people didn't just change wages, it forced innovation. Remember, labor was now expensive. If you were a business owner in the 1300s, you could no longer afford to throw human bodies at a problem. You had to be smart. You had to automate. This era saw a surge in labor-saving technologies. We see improvements in water mills, in mining technology, and in ironworking. The plague forced Europe to substitute capital and technology for labor. But there is one specific technological chain reaction that changed the world forever, and almost nobody talks about it. It's the connection between the Black Death and the printing press. Here is the logic. The plague killed millions of people. Those people left behind millions of sets of clothes. In the Middle Ages, clothes were made of linen and wool. These clothes were gathered up and turned into rags. In this era, paper wasn't made from wood pulp. It was made from linen rags. Suddenly, Europe was flooded with the raw material for paper. The price of paper plummeted. A century later, when Johannes Gutenberg was tinkering with his movable type, the economics finally made sense. Before the plague, parchment made from animal skin was too expensive for mass production. But now, thanks to the surplus of rags from the plague victims, paper was cheap. You could argue that without the Black Death, the printing press wouldn't have been economically viable when it was. And without the printing press, you don't get the spread of science, you don't get the Reformation, and you don't get the scientific revolution. God, death, and the map. While the economy was booming, the soul of Europe was fracturing. For centuries, the Catholic Church held absolute moral authority. They told the people that if they were good and followed the rules, God would protect them. Then, the plague arrived. The people watched as the priests died just as fast as the sinners. They saw bishops flee the cities while common friars stayed to die with the sick. The illusion of the church's invincibility was shattered. This planted the seeds of skepticism. People began to question authority. This skepticism eventually bloomed into the Protestant Reformation and the humanism of the Renaissance. The focus shifted from the afterlife, which seemed uncertain, to this life. And this shift wasn't just in the mind, it changed the map of the world. Before the plague, Europe traded with the East via the Silk Road, a land route protected by the Mongol Empire. But the plague didn't just hit Europe, it devastated Asia and the Middle East, too. It destabilized the Mongol Empire, causing it to fragment. The Silk Road became dangerous and lawless. The tap was turned off. The spices, silks, and goods Europe craved were suddenly cut off or taxed to oblivion by new powers like the Ottomans. Europe was cornered. They had the money, thanks to the new economy, and the demand, but no route to the market. They were forced to look for a back door to the east. They looked to the ocean. It is no coincidence that the age of exploration kicks into high gear as Europe recovers from the plague. The drive to find a sea route to India, which led Columbus to the Americas and Vasco da Gama to Africa, was a direct result of the land routes closing in the wake of the plague's geopolitical chaos. The Phoenix. When we look back at the Black Death, we naturally mourn the loss. It was a time of unimaginable suffering. But history is cold. It does not care about suffering, only consequences. The Black Death was the forest fire that burned down the old rotting wood of medieval Europe. It cleared the canopy. It allowed light to reach the forest floor. Without that fire, the feudal system might have dragged on for centuries more. The Industrial Revolution might have been delayed. The Americas might have remained isolated. The plague forced humanity to innovate, to question authority, and to value labor. It concentrated wealth in a way that funded the Renaissance and the arts. It is a dark irony, but the modern world, with its middle class, its technology, and its global connections, was built on the graves of the 14th century. The Black Death didn't just end the Middle Ages, it invented the future.